Hey guys, Chris here with Joe. Welcome to the Good Old Gamer. Me and Joe will get to the discussion part towards the end, so if you want to just go ahead and click on the timestamp below, you can go ahead and just skip straight to the discussion. But I'm going to go ahead and basically go over some of the basics between Vsync, Freesync, Gsync, and all of that stuff real quick, just for those of you that don't know. This is going to be a quick overview. If you want more details, you can easily Google search it. There's tons of information, but I'm going to give you the basics that you need to know to kind of understand what we have going on here, and hopefully that'll clarify a little bit for you guys. Okay, so to start off with, Vsync's been around forever. Why is Vsync important? Vsync is where the game refreshes at the same speed as your monitor, meaning if your monitor's 60 hertz, which 99% of you, that's the case, the game will slow itself down to only run at 60 frames per second. Even if it could run all the way up to 300 or 400 frames per second, it'll limit itself to 60. Now, what this will do is that means every time the screen refreshes, the game will also refresh for you. So this means you're getting a one-to-one comparison, which is great, and this offers you a 16.6 millisecond response time, which for most people is pretty adequate. Now, the trouble with VSync is if you drop one frame below 60, this throws the whole thing off. Obviously, it can't work. It can't display 60 complete frames with 60 refreshes. So what the software does is it'll then slow everything down to 30 frames per second for a very short period of time, 1, maybe 2 seconds, however long it takes to get the game running back at 60. And the same thing also applies if you're talking about a 30 frame per second game. If you drop below 30 frames per second, it will technically drop down to 20 frames per second. So this way it'll keep the frame pacing level. Now, if you like, you can see here on Digital Foundry, that's why the frame time graph will go, be flat at 16 milliseconds, then it'll drop all the way down to 33 milliseconds, and then it'll drop back up. And there's nothing really in between. It's one or the other. And this is why, especially with consoles that use VSync, you will feel the controls feel heavy. They don't feel very responsive, and this is the reason why, is because your control latency will instantly spike up whenever the frame rate target is not being hit. So, well, why would you want to use VSync, you might ask? Well, VSync eliminates screen tearing, which on a 60 hertz panel is extremely evident. Even running a game at 60 frames per second locked, without VSync, the screen will tear all over the place. It is a complete mess. So this is the reason why most games will go ahead and put on VSync. Now, there's something called adaptive VSync, which a lot of games, especially in this current generation, do use. And what that is it'll VSync the game once it hits the frame rate target, meaning 30 frames or 60 frames per second. Now, if it drops below its target frame rate, what will happen is VSync will be disabled. You will get screen tearing, but you don't get those huge spikes in response time. On PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, most games use this because obviously it's going to reduce the input lag a lot, and it's kind of the best of what they can do right now, unfortunately. Obviously, it would be nice if they optimize their games to never run below a certain frame rate. If that means using low instead of high settings, in my world, that's still better, but I digress. Continuing on, another option is just going with VSync disabled, just completely disabling it. And like I kind of touched on a second ago, your response times would be great because even on a 60 hertz panel, if a game's running at 100 frames per second, or let's just use 120 just for simple math, your input lag and the response time will actually go down to 8 milliseconds, or 16 milliseconds divided by 2. That's how you get 8. Now, this will make the games feel even more responsive. But on a 60 hertz panel, you get a lot of screen tearing. But I did notice, I went ahead and tested this myself, games running at or above 95. 95 seems to be the mark where things start changing. I've jumped up in 5 frames increments. Even on a 60 hertz panel, the screen tearing is lessened. So it's not as bad if you're running at super high frame rates, even on a slower monitor. Now, in contrast, on a high refresh monitor, a game running as low as 60 frames per second, screen tearing is noticeable at 60 frames per second on, let's say, like a 144 or 120 hertz panel. However, once you get up to that 95 frame per second mark, screen tearing is completely gone. You can't notice it. Unlike you can see it on a 60 hertz panel, but on a 144 hertz panel, it just becomes unnoticeable to the human eye. So that's another option that you can go, and that is to run your game super fast, and you get the excellent response times. Now, this is where Gsync, Freesync, and Adaptive Sync. Adaptive Sync is basically the technical term for Freesync. Okay, and it's technically the same thing for Gsync, but they implement theirs a little bit differently. So FreeSync and Adaptive Sync are the same thing. Basically, AMD is just marketing the Adaptive Sync optional portion of DisplayPort 1.2. It's an optional feature that anybody can implement. It's built right into the DisplayPort standard. So this is something that's just there that every manufacturer can just take advantage of. AMD just marketed it. Okay, so what this does is if your monitor, let's say, is still 60 hertz, and your game, instead of running, for this second, it's only going to be able to pump out 55 frames per second. Something's going on, alpha effect, something's dropping the frame rate. What'll happen is the monitor will actually slow down. It will adapt, and it will only display the 55 frames instead of trying to force 60. So what this does is this allows, once again, input lag to remain, gradual. Obviously, less frames means more latency, which means more input lag. But we're not talking about going from 16 milliseconds all the way down to 33 milliseconds. So it's a much better option, and you don't get screen tearing either. So this kind of eliminates both problems. Now, Gsync does the exact same thing. The only real difference is with Gsync monitors, they require a special processor inside of the monitor that's designed by Nvidia. This is the reason why Nvidia prices are higher on the Gsync monitors. You will see the exact same monitor from Nvidia here, from let's say Asus, and then you'll see the same monitor over here that supports FreeSync, and it will be less money because Nvidia needs to make money on those little processors. So there's more cost involved. That's why AMD went with the term FreeSync. But at the end of the day, it is the best solution overall. And honestly, this is where the market's heading. This is where everything's going. AMD has even found a way to get FreeSync to work via HDMI. Now, this is not a part of any HDMI standard yet, but I would assume here in the near future it probably will be, or at least, the very least, I'm hoping it will be. So guys, that's just a quick overview of, VSync, FreeSync, Gsync, and all that stuff. Me and Joe are going to go and discuss why the market needs to shift and why that is such a good technology. The adaptive sync technology is pretty much needed for everything, and especially for consoles. And hopefully we will get that at some point. All right, Joe. So part of the reason why I'm bringing this up is you actually have a FreeSync monitor and you have an Nvidia graphics card. Mm-hmm. And personally, I think FreeSync is going to be the future. And there's a couple reasons why, and I'll kind of go over that here. Probably. But I mean, how's that working for you right now? Like, how's that combination working out?
I mean, it's working just fine. The monitor's a fantastic monitor, but unfortunately, without a AMD card, I can't really take advantage of the FreeSync. So I am currently utilizing the 970, running whatever settings I have to maintain a minimum of 60 frames per second. But the monitor is still running at 144 hertz, and so generally, actually, for most of the games, I'm hitting 70, 80, 90 frames per second, except in like Doom where I'm hitting 120, which is awesome. Yeah, overall, it's working just fine. I mean, can't say that I'm having any issues.
I mean, are you running with like VSync off? Are you running?
No, I can't. Unfortunately, with like for instance, Metal Gear Solid 5 is what I'm playing right now currently, and I have to have VSync on that because otherwise, even at run, I can have the game running at 1440p on almost complete ultra. Like there's just one setting set to high instead of extra high or whatever it is, and
okay.
it runs at a solid 60 frames, 59.9. I have VSync on. There's no tearing whatsoever. It works perfectly. So
Okay.
it's very dependent on the game.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I did some testing, and if you lower your image quality settings to the point where your games are running at about, at least on my monitors, it seems up to about 95 frames per second, with VSync off, you shouldn't have too much of an issue. I don't know if you had tested that out at all or not. Try to push the games, lower quality, increase frame rate to get rid of it in the meantime.
No, I haven't done anything like that. I'll be honest with you. I'm more about my visual quality than I am more than 60 frames per second, you know. So
Okay.
for me right now, well, because currently I'm still hitting the 970. Believe me, I would like to have both, but it is what it is. So, you know, for instance, the game, it's really all about the games you play, right? So, you know, Metal Gear is a good looking game. I was playing The Witcher 3, which is a fantastic looking game. And those are games that I'd rather have higher graphical fidelity with 60 frames per second than higher frames per second and perhaps lower graphical fidelity. I can't. I'd rather have the better graphics. So even at 60 frames, it still looks good. Although I certainly appreciate playing Doom, which looks fantastic and has,
Right.
you know, high frames per second.
My
But yeah,
big
that
thing is when you're running VSync, do you feel the input lag on your keyboard?
yes, I can say that there are moments. Plus, I'm not using a keyboard, by the way. I'm using a controller for those
Okay.
games. But yes, there are.
So even on
It's
a controller, you're feeling the input lag then.
barely. It's there, and I've noticed it. You know, like because it's going from playing Doom and then that I
Right.
feel the difference. So you know, once I get playing it for a while, which I've been playing a lot of Metal Gear today, and you know, I've played a ton of The Witcher. You know, playing it after a while, you know, you kind of forget the input lag. You learn to compensate, you know, unconsciously, subconsciously, whatever. But overall, yeah, once it's kind of jarring to go from Doom to any of these games right now because there's a definite lag. It's there, it's minuscule, but it's enough to make you go, what the, you know, like
Yeah.
this is not good.
Well, Doom's one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video is because I have Doom obviously on PC, which
Right.
we've shown off on the channel plenty of times. But I also
Hmm.
bought it on the Xbox, mostly just in case my brother wanted to play, and so I could show him the game.
Right.
Plus, I just wanted to test it out and see how it felt. And honestly, I can barely play the game on the Xbox. And you and
Right.
I played competitively online. And I told you I was in my living room using a controller on PC. And what did I go? 24-3 or something like that,
Right.
or something. So obviously it's not a problem on PC, but I can't even beat the campaign on normal on the Xbox because of input lag. And that's really kind of tying in with the whole. Honestly, I think consoles, for the most part, probably need FreeSync or Gsync. And obviously, I'm going to suggest FreeSync for a lot of reasons here in a minute.
Yeah.
But I believe that those systems need it more than anything else because they are so frame rate limited. And that extra input latency is just abysmal when you have to put VSync on. That's something that doesn't really come up that much on PC. Like, I don't use VSync at all,
Right.
ever on my PC. Just turn that crap off and let the game run as fast as it wants to. But you do get screen tearing if your frame rates are too low. So
Right.
there are trade-offs. So, well, I've been talking about a couple of things here, and let me just go ahead and show our viewers. What I find really interesting is a couple years ago, this number was a lot different. We're starting to see the shift between FreeSync and Gsync. Like right now, currently on Newegg, there's 125 Gsync monitors available and 251 FreeSync monitors. So it's basically double. But I remember last year there was about 30 Gsync monitors around this time, and there was like 5 or 8 FreeSync monitors. So we're
Yeah.
definitely seeing things shift uh, far more towards FreeSync. One of the big reasons why is when you see the least expensive G-Sync monitor, we're looking at $379, and the least expensive FreeSync monitor is $119. So, I mean,
That is a sad state of affairs.
I mean, we're not even talking about apples to apples comparison here. But the other sad thing is like Nvidia owns the market. They have the best
Hmm.
graphics cards out right now, and because they want to force people to buy G-Sync monitors with their chips in there, which I said at the intro part of this video. Uh, they're not taking advantage of this standard. I mean, it's just part of DisplayPort. I mean, it's in there. It's just an optional
Right.
part that manufacturers can just turn on. And honestly, it's starting to piss me off that they're wanting to charge this exorbitant premium for their product that gives you virtually no benefit over the competition.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I have, as we already said, I have a GTX 970 running with a FreeSync monitor, and it does chat my ass just a little bit that I cannot take advantage of the FreeSync built into the monitor because Nvidia just doesn't want to do it. I mean, It's that simple. They don't want to do it. There is no technical issue. It's something they can turn on if they choose to do. They are simply choosing not to do it to force people to purchase their product or their G-Sync, and that is, as you said, extremely overpriced. And I think it's a big problem because what are you saying to your customers? I mean, right there, it's there's no inclusion factor whatsoever. There's no taking care of your customer. It's buy our crap or get the fuck out. That's the way they are right now, and that's a very sad state of affairs because that's the way it's been for a little while now, and they can do these things. Unfortunately, AMD has lagged behind terribly, so to purchase an AMD card right now is kind of handicapping yourself, unless, like you said earlier to me, that you were staying mid-range, and that's fine if you do. But if you're looking like me, as a gaming enthusiast type that wants to have really high graphical fidelity, you got to go with an Nvidia card. And if you want to take advantage of any of that, adaptive sync, G-Sync technology, whatever you want to call it, you have to buy a G-Sync monitor. And I think that's a real problem, but it does appear poised to change with Vega, looming large as it is, because that's what I'm waiting for. I could have gone with a 1070. I mean, hell, I might have been able to convince my wife to get me a 1080. But I don't think that would have been done. That would have done what I wanted because I want to take advantage
But
of this FreeSync.
I think this is going to lead to an even bigger problem because these G-Sync monitors are so expensive. Like most
Right.
of the decent ones, the 27-inch ones, if you want an IPS, you're looking at about $800,000-$900,000. These are very expensive monitors. Now, let's say Vega comes out, and let's say you had a 1070 or something, or a 970 like you, and let's play it in reverse. You have this really expensive monitor, and let's just say AMD comes out of the woodwork and they have the best price to performance graphics cards. You are screwed. You're basically in
Yeah.
your position in reverse. Um, this is just such a bad time for buying these really expensive monitors because honestly, I can't see G-Sync going the distance. It's just not going to be around forever. It's going to be cost prohibitive, and honestly, it's not a part of a standard. And that's usually what wins out at the end of the day is when it's part of an official standard that can be implemented in anything. So
Hmm.
I just see this being such a bad time, especially coming up on the holidays, and a lot of people are going to be wanting new monitors and stuff for Christmas. Maybe wives or girlfriends or parents will be buying monitors.
That's what I mean, because that's what I'm talking about for Christmas. I'm going to get, or maybe thereafter, I'm going to be getting Vega. That's kind of my big Christmas present. So that's what I'm talking about. And I think, with this monitor, with any monitor, if you're kind of hamstringing yourself if you stick with a G-Sync monitor. Plus, like you said, it's
Yeah.
probably not going to go the distance. If I mean, how could it? I mean, look at FreeSync. It's free. I mean, it's right in the name. It is literally free. There's no extra price involved. How could they hope to compete, especially when AMD is about to be able to compete directly with their highest and best cards?
Right.
I feel like that, the beginning of next year is going to change a lot for Nvidia, whether they like it or not. And they're going to have a hard time charging the prices they are for the things they want to sell when I could probably spend less on an AMD card, get a good monitor that's just as good, 1440p, 4K, whatever. That's going to cost a lot less because it doesn't have G-Sync, but it has FreeSync. I mean, I can't see. I mean, unless you're a fanboy, which is fine if you are. If you're a big Nvidia fan, you've always had Nvidia, good, great, grand, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's fine if you want to do that. I don't necessarily agree with that position. I think you should be more practical and pragmatic. But
Yeah, I
in
mean, you never know. Like if AMD happens to come out with a card that's twice as powerful for the same amount of money, I mean, you'd be silly to, or let's say Nvidia has another Fermi and the
right,
thing, burns up 400 and something watts. I remember having two GTX 470s in a
oh my
computer.
god,
It was
yeah,
ridiculous, guys. I had to buy a 1,000-watt power supply mostly for those video cards, but I mean, it's gonna happen. AMD is gonna take the lead again. I mean, at some point, and they're gonna go back and forth, and you're gonna be stuck with this very expensive, very nice monitor. G-Sync monitors are
yeah,
good, but I mean, they lack the option for additional ports. This is another big thing that I have a problem with G-Sync. Only the newer ones have both a display port and an HDMI 1.4 port. There's no other ports available, and on older G-Sync monitors, it was one display port only. It's like, how practical are these things? Like if you want
right.
to plug in like a console or maybe a second computer or something else. I mean, for the premium, I just don't get it. I have a GTX 1070, and there's just no way I could see the value in spending that kind of extra money on something with less features overall.
Well, yeah, let's put it in terms of pure dollars. So let's say there's a G-Sync monitor for $500, which is completely reasonable as terms of G-Sync monitors go. That's probably what you're going to pay
Here,
for a
I
good
can
one.
go ahead and put one on the screen. So,
Right.
one of the G-Sync monitors, probably one of the better bangs for the buck, is the Dell 27-inch gaming monitor. Newegg's got it for 579.
And that is 1440p, I'm assuming?
1440p,
Right.
144 hertz.
Now, if you had a 1440p FreeSync monitor, it's probably going to cost, for instance, the one I have, which is a Asus monitor. I can't remember the model number off the top of my head, but it's a 1440p, 144 hertz. I got it for $350, which is just over $200 less than that monitor is.
Right.
So that's $200 I could put back in my pocket, and or if you so choose, maybe get a better video card. So if you can, let's say you've got a budget and you want to upgrade your video card and get a monitor to go with it, you're going to spend $560, you said, roughly, plus for a 1070,
570. Yeah.
570. So plus what, 400 for a three? I'm sorry, for a 1070 right now, roughly $400.
Uh, yeah, I'd say 400 is pretty fair for a 470.
Right.
Or
So you're
I
looking
mean,
at
1070. Ugh.
yeah,
I got the
yeah.
470 on my mind.
I know, right? I almost said it myself. And so you're looking at just under $1,000. Whereas you could spend $350, like I said, for this monitor, which is a fantastic monitor. It's a TN panel. It's not an IPS, but if you're not
Well,
into like real
so is that Dell that I was
right,
talking about. It's TN panel.
right, and most of the ones are for gaming. You probably want to stick with a TN anyway. But um, if you get my monitor for 350, and when Vega hits, I mean, which is all signs point to being there's going to be several models, but you will be able to spend up to $620 on a video card, which is roughly almost getting you a 1080 in terms of performance if you were to buy an Nvidia card. But when Vega hits, most likely will get you a more powerful video card for probably even less than that $620, and you will have a much better setup for the future, especially with DirectX 12 hitting and Vulkan. And AMD showing the gains they're getting. So if you want to put it in terms of practical dollars, for the same amount of money, you will end up with a better video card and a similar monitor, but by going with AMD.
I mean that's speculating. That's speculating and putting a lot of hope on Vega. But personally, I mean, it's a bad idea right now to go with G-Sync. I just don't see the future. Now, like in your position, you have a FreeSync monitor, and eventually even Nvidia is going to have to do it. I foresee they're going to kick and scream, and it's going to take a little while, but they'll eventually get there, and they will have to support it. Basically, all it is just a little update in their driver, and poof, it'll work. But
I just want to point out, while that was speculation, if you look at it in terms of, let's say they release a Vega that is directly equivalent to the 680. The 1080 and the 1070. I don't know where the 680 came from. You're with the one monitor, the Dell monitor, the G-Sync monitor, you're going to pay however much, and you can only get a 1070. Whereas with a FreeSync monitor, you were able to get a 1080. So you will end up with better graphical performance strictly based off of that. I just want to point that out.
Yeah,
you can either get apples to apples.
You can either get a stronger graphics card. I mean, it's 350 versus basically, let's just say 550. I mean, you're looking at what, a 40% savings right there. I'm just doing
Something
the math
like
off the
that.
top of my head. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty substantial. Now, like I kind of touched on earlier, the other big thing that needs to happen, and I can see this eventually happening. I mean, AMD already has the technology to go ahead and do FreeSync through HDMI. They have shown that they can do this. And like I said, with consoles, I seriously think with the PS4 Pro and the Xbox Scorpio, this really needs to be a thing. And TV manufacturers really need to start jumping on this. So if anybody out there works on televisions, this is a feature we need. Honestly, this is far more important than HDR will ever be. HDR is just better color. That's cute. This actually affects gameplay. More responsive controls, and just a much smoother experience, because consoles never hit their frame rate target constantly. Like even a 30 frame per second game, pretty much all of them's they're gonna drop a frame here and there. I mean, it's gonna happen. On my PC, I could run a game at 60 frames per second and it'll never ever drop below 60. That's possible, but on consoles that doesn't happen. So this technology, I think, would really benefit that market probably more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of shocked we're not hearing about it in terms of with the new, PS4 Pro and Xbox Scorpio. I am kind of shocked we're not hearing anything about it. It must be because it's something the television industry is currently not interested in doing because it's not. It doesn't appear as though it'd be something that's going to be extremely,
which makes no
costly.
which makes no sense to me because they're really pushing this HDR nonsense. And like I said, there's a lot of you guys out there who are gonna be like, "Oh, HDR is great. Yeah, it does look better." But I
Yeah.
mean, do you prefer better gameplay experience or shinier graphics? Some people do love their graphics. That's
Yes.
fine. But we're talking about something that I can't even play games, certain games on consoles because of the implementation of VSync. Uh, it's pretty sad.
Yeah, but that's because you're jaded by your computer and how powerful it is. If you're a,
Well, there's other
specific
games that
console
work
gamer.
fine. I'm just saying it's the implementation of VSync. VSynced games I cannot play. Games with adaptive sync, it's okay because when the frame rate drops, it just starts tearing, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But it's the games where frame rate drops or it's adjusting the resolution, which a lot of the games do now. They have that
Yeah.
just changes, but your input latency just skyrockets.
No,
And
I get where you're coming from, but I feel like if you're a console only gamer, you don't do PC, whatever reason you feel like it's too expensive, which is just ludicrous, and you can find any number of articles explaining why that's not the case. But if you're mainly a console gamer, you're used to it. It's not you don't know what you're missing if you've never had it in a sense. So it's not like that's such a big need for console gamers. It's really only
I
a
don't
need for
know.
people who know the difference, like you. It's a big difference for you. Even for me, it's not the biggest difference yet. But like I said, once I play Doom for a while and then I go to play one of these games, totally feel it. It's very evident. And I haven't been gaming on my console in quite a while, but I got to say, I think it's hard for us, more
I
because
mean
you are such a PC enthusiast.
that might be part of it, but I mean, there's a lot of people out there, even console gamers, like because I'd search, I'll go online, I'll be like,
Right.
is it just me? Is there a way to fix it, maybe? And it's just something that can be implemented so easily, and shouldn't really cost much of anything. That's really
Right.
kind of my point. It's like, why are we focusing on this? It'd be great for marketing. Sony, at the very least, you figure they'd be putting it in their TVs because
Hmm.
what would it cost them? Maybe a couple of bucks to update some firmware.
And if you're a gamer, you're gladly going to pay that, throw that into the cost of the television. Nobody's going to argue.
Boom, extra
Um,
premium.
no, and that's absolutely true. Considering you're right, Sony could do it. The fact that they're not is a little weird. That we haven't heard anything about it.
Right.
But again, I think if you're a console gamer, it's just not as big a deal to you. You're kind of used to it, and you're probably and those console gamers that have talked about it are probably in the minority. But that's a growing minority too, because more and more people like you. I mean, I'm 32, you're 32, and we are talking about people that were kids like us who have grown and are adults, have our own money, and can purchase these things for ourselves. And it's no longer a bad thing to do. Being a gamer is not really such a negative thing. A lot
Right.
of husbands, and people that are not married, whatever, they're grown ups now that are still heavy into their gaming. So it is a growing market in the sense of people that would take advantage of this. It's not like because when I was kids, it was so dependent on your parents, which every kid is. But it's not like you had adults buying these games. They were very few and far between. If you had an adult that went out and purchased it for himself and set himself up, these are consoles being purchased for their kids. So they don't. The parents didn't care about that, and they wouldn't today. We would for our kids, but so I think like it's definitely something that we could see in the future, and I think it's a good point. It doesn't cost anything to put it in there, and it would definitely help drive sales. I think if you're a console gamer, but
Right. I
unfortunately, we're
mean,
still a minority
I
right
mean,
now.
it's just more of a feature that it actually has tangible benefit.
Yes.
And when you talk about these new consoles, this mid generation refresh, there's very little in the way of tangible benefits being really talked about. That's probably the one thing that's really getting to me is it's like, well, what's the point of this thing? They haven't,
HDR. HDR.
which I've seen, and
I
honestly
know.
doesn't really matter.
I know.
Does
I know
not
you don't
matter,
care for
people.
it.
Well, I mean, it's nice. My next TV is going to have one. It's definitely
Right.
better. But honestly, a lot of HDR. I was actually doing a lot of reading because I'm thinking about getting a new television. Black Friday and all coming up, and a lot of televisions will actually increase input latency dramatically with HDR on there. So for anybody watching this, make sure that if you are input sensitive, you have to do a lot of homework out there and make sure that under HDR specifically, uh, you know, check the reviews and see which ones have low input lag. Looks like Samsungs are pretty good about it, and a couple of the Sonys are pretty good from what I was reading. So, just do your homework on that one, which we always say.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about all I have on this issue. I mean, it's just kind of an interesting topic. There's going to be a lot of people buying a lot of new tech, and I think this is kind of important for people to know. Hey, maybe I shouldn't invest, $800 into a G-Sync monitor. Don't do it.
Please don't. And again, we're not fanboys here for AMD, but we try to be as pragmatic as possible. Very practical with our dollars, very frugal in that sense. And if you're
Right.
going to spend money, it's hard to justify spending an extra $200 for a G-Sync monitor when Vega is so close at hand.
Well,
Maybe
I'm
six
I'm
months ago.
I'm gonna ignore Vega. Just pretend Vega's
Well,
not
you're
even
going
a
to
thing.
ignore Vega. I'm not ignoring
Don't
Vega.
don't don't even worry about Vega. I mean, the thing is, eventually, Nvidia is gonna have to support this because if you
That's
spend
true.
that $800 on a monitor, how long does your monitors last? I pretty much use mine until they burn out. So, 10 years maybe they probably stick around somewhere.
I mean, I've got mine's going on 8 years, 9 years now. So yeah,
Yeah,
and that's my old one, which is still functioning. I decided to upgrade to this because I was bored.
right. You just wanted something better.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you keep your monitors.
Oh, it's
Might
still
not be
there. Yeah.
yeah, it might not be your primary, but it sticks around for about a decade. So you don't want something that you're going to spend that much money on, and then let's say 4 years from now, you can't use it the way you want to. Maybe G-Sync well, you'll probably still use an Nvidia graphics card, but if Nvidia doesn't have a good performer at that time, and you want to switch over, you're going to be screwed buying a video card that you don't like. So it's one of those, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't at this point. But
Yeah.
I'd say if you're going to buy a monitor, get a FreeSync one. You're more future proof. I think that's ultimately, at all of this, it's where we're going.
No, I agree. It's an anti-consumer practice by Nvidia, so I can't support it anyway. Buy FreeSync, save yourself some money. Wait for Vega. I think you'll be happy.
Alrighty, guys. That'll do it for me and Joe here tonight.
Yep, that's our deep dive, I guess. You guys have a good night. Thanks for watching.